Welcome back to the Financial Therapy Podcast. I'm Jane Monica Jones, your host and personal financial therapist. In recent years, we've heard a lot about financial well-being or financial wellness. But what does it really mean? When we think of financial well-being, we often might think about education on strategies such as how to invest, diversify, and accumulate. And if you look at your favourite bookstore, there's plenty of books on financial education strategies. But interestingly, research shows financial knowledge and experience only makes up about 9% of what makes us better at managing or multiplying our money. A lot of research is now saying that psychological and behavioural factors make up the majority of us being better with money at around 61%. So it's not surprising we are seeking more financial psychotherapists or financial psychologists that can help with us and money. And I'm going to insert my own flagrant self-promotion here. That's why I wrote the book, The Billionaire Buddha, which repairs the psychological and behavioural issues we have with money. But enough about me. Let's talk about women. What does the research say about how women manage money and how they relate to money in the context of having many structural barriers against them, such as earning less, having less superannuation because of time out of the workforce?
Some women we found had such hardship growing up that they were scarred basically for life.
To give us a lot more clarity, we are speaking with expert financial wellbeing and financial capability researcher, Professor Rosalind Russell from the School of Economics, Finance and Marketing at RMIT University. And just a heads up, the sound quality in some of the spaces is not fabulous. We didn't realise that until after the recording had taken place, but bear with it. Most of the quality is fabulous and fabulous content, so hope you enjoy. Rosalind Russell, thank you so much for being on the Financial Therapy Podcast.
Thank you, Jane. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about money with you.
Just before we get started, tell us a little bit about what you do.
I'm a research-only professor at RMIT University, and so my role is really to work with industry, work with real people, and undertake research that matters. My particular area of research for the last 15 to 18 years has been around financial well-being, financial capabilities, financial literacy, financial education, and looking at a lot of programs and issues that relate to those topics.
Interesting you say financial well-being. That's something that we hear a lot of sort of banks are using in their marketing material at the moment, or it's a bit of a buzzword we've heard maybe in the last 5 years, but you've been looking and researching this area for over 15 years. Can you just give us an idea of a definition of what financial well-being is?
Yes, look, it's a much better term than I think what we were talking about before then, which was more just financial literacy or financial education. So financial wellbeing is broader, and what it means is essentially being able to make your commitments, your financial commitments, meet them on a day-to-day basis and in the future. So be able to pay bills, food and housing, but also it means to be financially comfortable as well. So having enough money left over to allow you to do things that give you some joy in life. So it's not just the nitty-gritty, pay your bills and get through, but a little bit of comfort there. And it also means having resilience, which again is a bit of a buzzword, but it means being able to bounce back when there's a financial adversity that you come across, and we all have that. Rain falls on all people, and we're not ever going to be immune from having financial hiccups from time to time, no matter how well off we are. So it encapsulates those three things, day to day, the future, and resilience, and being comfortable. All things.
I know that you have focused on women and money. I'm really interested in speaking to you about that particularly. What did you find fascinating about researching about how money and women are linked and what we as women do differently or interestingly? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Look, the women and money came about through a lot of commissioned research earlier, first up. And I noticed through all that research that women were in this special situation where there was a lot of resilience, but a lot of barriers that they were facing. And I could see, that were hampering their financial well-being. And so from that, we put in an ARC grant, which is a government grant and we did have the freedom then to look exactly what we wanted to about women's situation and money. Why did they make the financial decisions that they were making? What were the factors that surrounded their financial situation? So it was really interesting, and we were able to had the luxury of spending a few years talking to women across Australia and doing quite a large quantitative survey as well. So I guess the interesting thing about women is that so much of their financial lives were focused on the family and not just themselves. So we found that to come into the picture all the time. And whenever we asked them about money, they were the stories that were brought up. Their past, their history of money when they were children, and also and how that framed their current situation.
That's interesting you say that, sort of the past with them and money. I think you refer to it as being socialization. The modeling, I suppose, when we were growing up, or maybe the inspiring tales, or even the tales of warning, really. Do you think that really shapes our way of being with money, or in some sense?
Oh, definitely. Look, it is. It forms our wiring from an early age, and all educationalists and psychologists will know that. And as a therapist, I'm sure that you can see what our past brings to our current situation and also our future. So, and in many cases, it's good, but of course, it varies across everybody. And some women we found had such hardship growing up that they were scarred basically for life, and it shaped their attitudes to money, it shaped their relationships, and it was really hard. It's very hard to undo that, especially on your own. And so I think that was the most fascinating part of our research. Was as soon as we would ask a question about money, it would immediately take them back to experiences and stories. And some were great stories, some were funny, some were really, really sad, but that's what they bring to their current situations and what drives their decisions.
Yeah. Being a financial therapist, of course, I sit as a therapist, but I'm often speaking to people that are in the finance area. And one of the areas that like a platitude that I often hear is that you can't be emotional around money.
Mm-hmm.
It's about survival. So of course it's going to be locked up with lots of emotion. And it's interesting that you say that that's kind of a quality that I suppose women bring to their talking about money. What do you think about that expression?
Look, this is why women don't go to financial advisors at the banks and anywhere else, because we got that message straight up, and it was we don't trust them. It was they wanted to just sell us products straight away. They didn't want to hear my story. They didn't want to get to know me. They didn't ask me about my family, and so it was all of those comments, and they were very, very anti-financial advisors. And I found that really concerning, because we all need some help with making big financial decisions, and it's not something we're born with, knowing this. And if people are really averse to going and seeking help, imagine if we didn't want to go to the doctor when we had a serious health issue or a pain somewhere, and we don't go to see the doctor. This is what it's like. They have nowhere else to go. So it's a very concerning issue that remains today. Actually, there's actually nowhere really for everyday people and everyday women to go and seek financial advice that they're comfortable with. And I remember one focus group we had, and one woman said, "Oh, look, I had the most amazing financial advice experience." It was a woman that she had sought advice with, and she came over, we had a wine together, and for at least 2 sessions she didn't even bring up money, hardly. She wanted to know what I wanted for myself and my daughter, and everyone of course was saying, what's her name, so it was that's what women are after. They do need to have their family and emotions acknowledged, not to say that it doesn't matter or it's not to be involved. And until that's brought into the picture, they are not going to get the advice or the help that they need.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, just really making it more holistic rather than this part that's kind of separate from any other part of their worldview or relating to the world.
Yes.
We've spoken that financial well-being is that buzzword. Often, I think a lot of people believe that in order to gain a sense of financial well-being, they only or maybe look first to financial literacy and financial education, which is understanding what financial products are out there or budgeting or how I pay down debt. Do you think that's all we need in financial well-being?
Mm. No, it's not all we need, but it is a necessary part of it. How you get that know-how or experience is one thing. And so if you're missing out, if you have missed out on having that experience and or the opportunity to make decisions or to learn about money or to become familiar with it, then of course there needs to be other avenues available to people, to women and men, to actually get the education or the know-how that's needed. So, and now it is in school, so there is some education in the curriculum in Australia, which is great, and in many parts of the world. So it's and that's really important because it's part of our life, and kids need to be learning about it. But if you've missed all that, where do you go?
Mm.
And we don't want people to get caught up in those wealth seminars where people are flogging property or rich quick schemes. So there needs to be some unbiased, trustworthy means if we talk about financial education, it doesn't have to be a classroom or it doesn't have to be sit down and take notes. And there are many different forms of financial education, and it can be just a teachable moment. So, I want to know about, buying my own home. So let's learn about that. Doesn't mean you have to learn about every single product on the market. We call them teachable
Yeah.
moments. So there might be times in your life where you do need to know about a certain thing before making a certain decision, and that needs to be available somewhere. So we can't say that financial education is not necessary. It is, because just like reading and writing it, yeah, I think it has its place.
As you've been speaking about it for many years, is there kind of in government institutions or organisations that are start looking at that beyond the financial literacy?
We do, and I do work with ASIC and some of the banks and also community organisations, which are trying to serve all people and all different situations and circumstances. And the government is very much on the ball, actually, about financial well-being in a more holistic view. So they are investing in things like mental health and young people mindsets, which I think mindset is one of the most critical aspects of financial well-being, and it's even deeper than just behaviors. So it's about creating that right mindset and a mindset that's conducive to financial well-being. And often that's a bit overlooked. It's almost like we think if we can just tell people the technicalities and the right behaviors, but all of that, we know with all of our behaviors, whether it's about health, exercise, diet, it's about the mindset. It doesn't start with the mindset. It's basically doomed to fail. So no, the government has a portfolio, the financial capability portfolio, which is really, really good at, and it's done some really great work in investing in understanding financial well-being for Australians.
I think what's really pertinent about our relationship with money is that it can certainly show up the vulnerabilities that we have, financial vulnerabilities that then can open into greater vulnerabilities around housing and security and safety nets. In your research looking at women and money, what do you see as some of the big vulnerabilities that women as a cohort have?
Look, the vulnerabilities all stem from inequality, and that's the macro picture, and and unfortunately it's such a big part of it that whatever we do, it's almost like trying to beat the tide or trying to get around these huge barriers that are there through inequality. And the structural issues provide the most vulnerabilities for women. So instead of having doors open for women, we face closed doors. And I think the vulnerabilities are around the choices and the constraints the choices women have to make, basically. And do I go to work or do I, stay home with the family? Childcare is so unbelievably expensive and hard to obtain in an affordable manner that women have to make this choice. So, okay, can't afford childcare. Right, have to stay home. 5 years out of the work puts you behind the eight ball, no superannuation during that time. So again, the inequality of not having superannuation provided to stay-at-home stay-at-home mums, or even caring for parents. This is what most women have to face. You're either facing, caring for your children or caring for elderly or ill family members, and it always mostly falls to the women. And there's no provision for that for superannuation. So you take time out and you're behind the eight ball, and it's very difficult to catch up. Sole parents is another big factor. Well, it's on the rise, and it makes it very difficult for women to maintain working and also caring for the family and paying for housing, affordable housing. It just seems to be one barrier after another.
So when you're speaking with women in your research, are they making political decisions to better that? A lot of that structural change can happen by political decisions.
Yeah, that's true. Look, I actually don't know the political voting habits of women as a whole, as a general. I don't think it is male or female. It's more than that. So yes, of course they wish for better childcare, and of course they wish for better superannuation arrangements. And I actually remember one story which will stay in my mind forever, and it was a group of women, I think in Brisbane, and it was after there was a big redundancy, a big cut in staff in the public service. And there was a woman who was like 42. She was single, actually. And she just said she had a cancer scare. And she said, I've just, been through a cancer scare. And she goes, you know what? The first thing that I thought of was, oh, well, at least I don't have to worry about my future. And to her, that was the upside of having a cancer scare. And I'll never forget it. And the room, it was just a hushed sort of a thing. And that's what it came down to. So there are many vulnerabilities about women's future, I think, and that the age group 40 to 59 are the most vulnerable. That's where there's these big dips, and it's that realisation where they have so little because of no superannuation, no provision for it. Marriages are broken down, maybe in that age group, and they've spent their lives caring for their family, and now they have nothing. So there is that, and of course we read all the publicity about the growing number of homeless women in that age bracket, and this is the fruits that they bear after a lifetime of serving their family and going without, basically. So it's really horrendous. I mean, it's not every woman, of course, finds themselves in that situation, but there is a growing number.
Yeah, gosh, that piece that you just shared then just is so impactful that, wow.
I'll never forget it.
Yeah, death will give me kind of certainty in a way. That's quite shocking.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, other women said, I've got $8,000, so that'll maybe get me my hip replacement. But this is a woman in her 50s or early 60s, but that's how much super she had. And it's just, and that's what they have to look forward to. So there is a lot of fear among women getting older when they sort of realise exactly what they have and what they haven't got. So I think it is time that that the government looks more closely at women's vulnerabilities and financial well-being.
Yeah, thank you, Rosalind. I mean, that's just so poignant on how much of a big problem this is, and it's going to get bigger as more, as women age, essentially, in our society as well. I mean, it's not just centric to Australia; it's happening all around the world. These structural changes that need to happen. Yeah. Look, and I think particularly in the fact that we're going through very high housing prices as well as uncertainty in COVID. I mean, it just shows how tenuous employment can be. It's affecting a large portion of the population across every demographic, really. But particularly, when you can't afford the major asset that will be converted into your superannuation, such as your house, that's another wave of a cohort that's going to have problems in the future.
Yeah, look, it sure is. That's exactly right, Jane. They're the worries that we have to think about going forward. And, we do have this whole set. And it's also across all sectors. At one point in time, some sectors were immune from cuts, but my own sector is not immune. We're going through huge amounts of cuts and redundancies, which we've never seen before in my whole career. So I think, there's less immunity for people in going through this situation at the moment.
Yeah. So I'm just interested in the idea of debt and women. One of the big phenomena that's coming out very recently, which is also very terrifying, is the afterpay model that's not regulated. And, I certainly have a very strong opinion about working with my clients, stay away from that, particularly if you have any sort of vulnerabilities, mental health vulnerabilities, because the whole thing just exacerbates it.
Mm.
Women and debt. Tell us a little bit about what we do around debt.
It's very interesting. I'm certainly glad you have that opinion and same thoughts about Afterpay that I have. And I'm extremely worried about that, especially for younger women and especially in this environment. Women can be quite debt averse, and that can be wrapped up in their childhood. There were women who told of, their parents who were small business owners losing everything, being, swamped in debt, and they made their minds up that they would never, ever be in debt. And so they're so debt averse that they avoid having any debt. Or they may have had racked up a lot of debt on credit cards and found themselves in a lot of trouble. Or they may have had a partner who racked up debt and left it to them. There are many experiences that affects women's thoughts about debt. We actually find there's a decrease in credit card holding among younger people especially, but then I do worry about this transfer of that mentality to the afterpay scenario. So look, it is interesting, and I think that the literature does say women are more risk averse, and I think that's probably true, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think that they're more conservative in how they may think things through, and they not so impulsive about big debts and investment decisions, and that's a good thing. Let's try and work with women's qualities rather than keep trying to beat them over the head and say, why are you so risk averse, and and why aren't you acting like a man? And I think that we just need to work with women's qualities and the strengths that they have, and they have enormous strengths, and the resilience that women have, and their abilities to pay down debt that they were left with. And there were many women who were just left unfairly with large amounts of debt. So it's a mixed, of course, it's a mixed feelings and differences across different populations. But I would say on the whole, they don't particularly like to be in a lot of debt.
A lot of financial strategists would say that we need to take a certain amount of risk in order to maybe make that gain.
Mm.
Are women in any way, not that we have to be like men, we have to find our own way, but is there something that we could be a little bit more less risk averse in order to get better financial gain?
I think having access to financial advice that was suitable to them is what is the key to that. And I think that if there was someone they could talk to that could work through them with their conservative approaches or their worries about it, and help them to see the proper picture rather than just the scary picture which they may have in their heads based on their socialization experiences, then I think there's a lot of that could be overcome, and it does need a place where they can do their own research and work through that. And there's one thing I hear a lot about in terms of in the research sector that I'm in and with the finance sector is like, why don't women engage with their superannuation fund? But what does that actually mean? And we don't know what that actually means. Does that mean just ringing them up on a daily basis and say, hey, I'm engaging with my super fund? But that's the biggest critique that I hear so much of, and in the research papers, is that women need to engage more with their superannuation fund, but we don't really know what that means. So that's the end of the story. Unless we actually know what that means, it's very difficult for women to take that on board when we've got day-to-day costs to contend with. And if we go back to that definition of financial well-being, first and foremost is meeting day-to-day commitments. And as a nation, this is what we do best. So most of us are meeting day-to-day. It's when we get to the future, and it's when we get to feeling comfortable, that the scores start to get a bit lower. But as a whole, we're content. We're very intent on meeting our day-to-day commitments, and women do that really well. Put food on the table alongside with engaging with my super fund. What are we going to do? So it's like, where's the time for that? Where's and that's that bracket of 40 to 59. You look at that bracket again. What are those women doing? They're juggling They're trying to do a whole host of things, and I'm sure engaging with their investment strategies is probably quite low on the list in terms of time.
It's a really interesting concept. I'm thinking, what do I just ring the number of my
Yeah,
superannuation?
yeah.
Who do I speak to?
And what do you say?
What am I supposed to be saying? That's right. It could be that conversation about maybe women. I know that there's been there's a couple of superannuations that are run by
Mm,
women. Maybe that's part of it, or that you make a ethical choice around what your superannuation is going to fund. But I'm unsure about, do men do that either? Are they calling the same number?
I don't. Look, I mean, yeah, it is interesting, and we haven't done a men-only study. I mean, I do know through the literature that yes, men are more likely to, to be engaged with their fund. But yeah, look, it is interesting, and I think that there's many men, and it's not all that, but they're not contending as much with the day to day and being consumed with,
Structural.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it just needs to be a little bit clearer about what women should exactly be doing with their engagement. So,
Yeah. Look, I mean, it could be that thing, I'm just pulling a
mm,
potential, men are probably more likely to do self-managed superannuation funds than maybe women. But women, because of their
mm,
structural issues that they're doing the day-to-day, don't have the space to be able to,
I know the bandwidth.
the bandwidth to be able to kind of manage a self-managed superannuation. But, I don't know the statistics on that.
And the other thing that comes into that with the women in the research though, and then when this came up, is like, why do I want to put myself through more pain when they know they've got very little there? And so it's almost like that avoidance. Well, do I need to beat myself over the head again to tell me how stuffed my future is going to be? So if you've got a ton of money there, and you're more likely to engage with it because it will make you feel better. But if you've got little to none there, I mean, how often do you want to look at that?
Mm.
Really, to you know to give yourself more pain and fear.
Yeah, yeah. Look, that's something that I work with often is, I mean, a lot of people come into my practice because they are freaking the hell out
Yeah,
on their financial situation, and having to, as we started this conversation, try and gear themselves with their mindset about improving that I can stay open, I can be
yeah,
less stressed and stay open to that, be empowered, that I can ask for that raise or ask for, take that financial risk. Yeah, it is such a holistic conversation.
yes. It's like an iterative cycle that once you've done a little bit, the confidence builds, and then you can do a little bit more, and then you can do a little bit more. And we saw that so much with the women that at first they had no idea, and either through death of a partner or divorce, they would say literally, I was thrown in the deep end. But going through it and working through it, and then they had their confidence and their self-esteem just went through the roof because they did it. When they would say, look, I've paid off this huge debt, and now I've got a savings account, and now I can take my children on a holiday. And I tell you what, was the most empowering experience, but it was through little by little. And I think that's the key, is start small with small behaviors and little goals and little changes, rather than engage with your super fund. So I think that's and there's a lot of work around tiny habits, and I think there's a lot in that. Start small, and from my experience and my research, is saving. So a small bit of savings is something that can actually change people's lives, and just that act of it, the habit, the sense of security, and the change that can help change your mindset. So from what I've seen over the last 15 to 20 years working with the banks and savings, it's really incredible.
Yeah, it's about building those kind of muscles, really, and that takes repetition and small starts and small wins as well. Yeah, you start seeing that you trim around the waist,
Yeah.
or a fatter bank account in the opposite.
Yeah.
Something that I'm kind of passionate about, but it's often not talked about, is money and shame. You just touched a little bit about how we really give ourselves a hard time about the financial situation that we can be in. It goes back into that early upbringing, and that we didn't get the tools, or that we've had setbacks and then we beat ourselves up? What was the conversation about money and shame?
Definitely about there was, and I remember again clearly this a group of older women, and she brought up some stories. She said that she's never even told her own children, and she was a woman in her 70s, and there was this shame about abusive situations earlier on, and about her partner, long-term husband, how controlling it was, and she shielded her family from that for all their lives. And she spoke about it and we felt so honoured, that this woman spoke in this group for the first time ever about the shame that she had endured all those years. And what I felt so sad is that she could never, and that's part of upbringing, never could talk to anyone else about it. And here she is at that point in her life, finally feeling that she could talk about these experiences. And so with the shame, we need to be able to talk to people more about it and having those conversations. And what they realize that other people have this as well. It's not just me. So surely it shouldn't come down to research focus groups in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's what, another structural thing that needs to happen. And that's a cultural thing as well. And, I was brought up the same way. My parents, you don't talk about money. It's that polite thing, money, religion, how we vote.
Yeah. I often say money is really the last taboo. It's the conversation we didn't have around sex 20, 30 years ago, But it's important because as you're just saying then, it's so amazing when you hear someone's true money story or reveal a little bit about, what it was like for you or when you were young or even when you were growing up or what it is now, how that softens ourselves and it gives ourselves a bit of a break and self-compassion can come in. And I talk about my money story often. I write about it. I talk about it. I try and get others to speak about their money story because it needs to come out, because there is so much darkness and so much hiddenness about it, and it's not serving anyone.
No, it isn't. It isn't. And if it's one thing that we can, I'd like to, see brought into schools with children is to teach them how to have money conversations. And it is a bit of an art form. It isn't that something natural that we have. So why not have some sort of a guide around things and when it might be a difficult conversation? And this is between, with partners and relationships as well. So let's help people learn how to have, healthy money conversations before it gets to a point where it causes pain and hardship.
And look, there's a certain amount of bravery that you've got to take. We've got to stop saying things like, don't be emotional about money. No, it's going to have emotion to it. It is very emotional for men and women. It's not just exclusively women. Men, there's a whole structural piece around they have to be a man and a provider or you're struggling with that. And it's not serving anyone when we can't say that conversation can be open. How was money for you when you were growing up?
Look, it was interesting, and it's only now in this research area over the last 15 years that I start to think about, what it meant for me growing up. My parents were, say, the generation that didn't talk about money, and it was my dad was an academic, and so money was like it was not to be wasted. My mum didn't work, and so she had to not ask for money as such, but an allowance. So I could see control. Now I recognize it for what it is. I could see that there was control going on with money and my dad. So I recognize that now. And I thought, and at the time, all I could remember thinking is I never want to be in that situation where I have to ask for money. And I always want to have my own money and be financially independent. But it was almost like money was not to be enjoyed. And it was a religious household, and it was almost like, so it was to help others and to do God's work, but it wasn't to be enjoyed as such. It took me a long time to get over that and to be able to be a little bit frivolous, with money from time to time, to enjoy it. We sort of got pocket money every now and again. It wasn't a right. It was like, if it'd been good. So for sure, money was tied up with many behaviours and attitudes that we had at home. And I wish they had talked more about money. So because we're basically thrust out into the world without really knowing any from what we saw. And actually, just on that note, the literature does say that modelling, how money is modelled in the home, is far more powerful than how it's talked about. So be careful what you do rather than what you say. So the home it's a really important part of socialization. So I think that it has to be part of all spheres, and it never should stop. It's not like learning about money should be contained in one part of our life or one time of our life. It goes on and on.
Yeah, beautiful. Captured so many things that I was so keen to ask. That idea around money and pleasure. That is a big things that I work with people, is not being able to have pleasure with money or feeling that they can deserve it or allow it. But it comes up very often when I'm working with people. We get very
That just gives me goosebumps, Jane. It's a topic that I'm just starting to explore more in the literature. And do you know who suffer the most from that? Us sole parents, sole mothers, and are not. They are even looked down on by society if they are seen to be enjoying money, especially if they're receiving any type of sole parent benefit, or it's like they will do anything to make out they're not enjoying life, and they feel they should deny themselves any cultural activity, and it's so wrong. And it's a real issue that I'm starting to recognise more and more, and I'm reading about more and more. It's a terrible thing, actually, the way that we see money that shouldn't be enjoyed or bring us any pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's something that is a massive theme that I'm constantly working with clients. It's just, how do we soften that? How can we?
And it's in that definition of financial wellbeing. And I think that's why I like that definition more so than how we used to think and talk about money, because it does have the element of being comfortable enough to allow us to make choices to enjoy life. And we tend to either stick to can we pay our bills, or can we provide for our retirement, and we forget about the middle part of life and about enjoying it. And so it is part of that definition, and I think we need to really remember that and encourage that part as well.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. The other thing, just probably to finish on, is because we didn't really get much guidance around money, I always like to kind of ask this question about what is it that, maybe it wasn't just about financial literacy, but what, as you individually, what were you kind of, as you've kind of grown up, what is that thing that you thought, I wish my parents taught me this about money, for you particularly?
Well, it's about what we were just talking about, and I wish that I could feel had the sense that we could enjoy it without feeling guilty. And guilt is part of church as well, so it was always imbued in anything that was anything good in life was was about guilt. So I think that was it, because we did always feel guilty, and I can always remember if I did have something new, even as an adult with my daughter, it's like Dad would say, "Oh, where did that come from?" And I would immediately feel guilty, unless it was a washing machine or he liked books, or something that was not wasteful. So it was really. I really wish that I had allowed myself to enjoy money a lot earlier, and not feel guilty about it. So I think that's probably the main thing. But I mean, he was big on saving and the austerity type of thing, which again is very wise, I suppose. And I sort of knew that we needed to budget and pay and make sure to pay the bills, and had some savings set aside for emergencies. But I think that security was overwhelming the most important thing to him, and that is good. But it also, I think, it put my life into a direction that maybe wasn't what I maybe have chosen. But it's like, choose the secure job, choose the secure profession, and choose this rather than so what we wanted, or what our own values were sort of not taken into account. It was really more about sensible, and like we talked about a bit earlier, it's not to be taken into account. Let's just do what's practical and what's logical and what makes good sense. So without sort of bringing your values, and I'm really big on first of all, discovering what your values are before talking about money. So that has to be part of any financial education or any financial literacy training. What are your values? Because unless they line up, it's never going to work out. So I think that having those principles of where your values lie are really important. So again, that wasn't part of the conversation. It was just being sensible. So,
Rosalind, thank you so much for being on the Financial Therapy Podcast. I feel like I'll have to get you back on. There's probably plenty of territory we can cover, but this has just been absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing your passion and your own story and all your research. And thank you. Really appreciate you being here.
it's been really great to talk with you, Jane, and it's fascinating. And I think that your role is just amazing, and it's so much needed. So it's fantastic.
Thank you, Rosalind. That's so lovely. You know, some of you might be interested to go and check out my book, The Billionaire Buddha. For those that live in Australia and want to get the hard copy, it's best to get in contact with me. You can find a link here on the Financial Therapy website. If you wanted an ebook, of course, you can get it at most online book retailers. I truly hoped you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the Financial Therapy Podcast as we continue to discuss a bigger conversation with us and money. Also, go to financialtherapy.org for more resources, financial wellbeing programs, or you can work with me. Just get in touch. And thank you for listening.